or more by Monday. Councillor Bay.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item number 10, 11, and 12. All three of those items passed committee. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues have any questions. If not, any questions? No? If not, then I will call all three of those items ready. Thank you.
Okay.
I wasn't fast enough. Councilor Bay, I got one question.
Okay.
I imagine I addressed this to Kate. Is the preservation board? Did they take a tour of the site? Did every member of the preservation board?
Counselor, no, not the entire board. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
He is reverting back.
There's a fair amount of reverb. Okay. Not the entire board. I wonder if there might be an opportunity to find out in which direction the council is thinking it might head with this designation.
I believe the consensus with the council is that the sanctuary, not the entire property, be designated.
Right.
As much was communicated out to us by the mayor as well.
Okay.
What you mean?
Okay, thank you. I did just actually, it was my plan to suggest that might be a middle road that could be a good compromise. I know that this has put the council in a difficult position, and I think that seems as though that would be an appropriate middle road to take. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it, Councilor.
Counselor, so is the idea that this would be modified before we vote on, or what's the plan?
To your question, Councilor Green, I'm glad you clarified as much. And maybe you can clarify for me, does the current legislation ask for the entire property to be designated? Then it would need to be modified. So let me make a correction, Council President. We're gonna have to hold number 10, revisit that. But number 11 and 12 will be ready unless we can get an adjustment made to this particular one, and the clerk can weigh in and let me know.
So, Counselor, this is Heather Lamandola. I do have my attorney, made sure Catherine was here today, but so I know Joe Barry is, I think, probably still out of the office, but he might be able to advise with respect to either remanding this back to the preservation board so that their resolution indicates the non-contributing components of the property, but the property itself, the entire property, will be designated because it's a parcel and it's an overlay on the zoning map. However, the resolution could indicate the contributing components of that. And just to be clear and make sure everyone feels a little more comfortable, designating the property does not mean that any development project cannot move forward. So I just wanted to clarify that development projects can still be submitted and move forward in some manner with or without designation.
Well,
the burden that it places then, because you make it sound like it's nothing.
What's that?
Like when you set it up that way, it makes it sound like, oh, we should do this as a default because the project can go forward. But can you describe the level of effort or the burden that comes along with it to the extent?
So the certificate of appropriateness would be necessary if the council designates the property. And what that is, it's akin to reviewing any proposal that affects the property. So the preservation board would look at it, and it's just a manner of review, much like a special permit or a project site review. But because if it is designated, it would go through this particular review and this particular board. They would look at the development proposal and decipher if it is appropriate or not. That's the reason for the name of the certificate. If it is not designated, it is still a historic property. So the path that a proposal will take depends on the result of the designation. If it is not designated, if it is allowed by right, then it would proceed through a project site review through the zoning office. The preservation board would still get to comment and weigh in because it's still a historic property. It just, if it doesn't get designated, it would not go to the preservation board for a certificate of appropriateness.
I think just for the sake of fairness and transparency for everybody, not making the assumption that it isn't transparent, we do send that back to the Planning Commission, Heather, and to my colleagues. But also, you know, the developer has to have the opportunity to weigh in, obviously from their perspective with the Planning Commission. For all we know, you know, they could be comfortable with the whole thing being designated, or it could be a deal breaker.
So Tim, I'm gonna jump in on that because Heather, has the developer come to the planning board?
No, and I also want to make a clarification, and Catherine will be able to speak to this. The task at hand before the council is not about any development proposal. I understand there has been discussions and there is something in the works, which is what kind of triggered the demolition, or I'm sorry, the designation in the first place because of the demolition. But really the task at hand at this point is to confirm whether or not the property meets the criteria for designation. I want to be clear on that as well.
We are clear on that, but and I'm sure you can appreciate it. We have to be also mindful of the outcome.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're clear on that, and as you all know, this is not our discussion on designations and developers buy-in, but again, that's a necessary discussion that has to happen between the parties involved before it comes back to the council.
President Pro Temp, just this, I just wanted to update everyone, and sorry, Kate Atwater, I wasn't able to get to you this morning to give you a call, but I spoke to Owen Kearney, and yes, President Pro Temp, if you could please just hold the item while we explore what the best path forward is, that would be greatly appreciated.
Councilor, the other thing I was going to say too, I mean, I know, speaking for myself, a lot of people have reached out to me wanting to comment on this. Is this something we would think about doing like a separate committee meeting where we allow public comment? I know that's your call, Councilor Bay, but I just didn't know what the best way to kind of direct that input is.
Maybe we should, and Heather, just so I'm clear on what you're saying, your position or what you're stating is it's not even a matter of sending it back because the whole thing has to be designated anyway if a designation happens.
No, what I'm saying is that the council could remand this back to the preservation board, the original petitioner, and suggest that they reconsider what are the non-contributing components of the property. That would be a way to perhaps get at what I'm hearing the council is saying about the sanctuary piece.
I'll speak for myself.
Catherine is trying to talk. She just can't be heard. I can see her lips moving.
I'll speak for myself. I know I toured the site prior to the Planning Commission meeting. You know, and I think when you look at the additions in the back, at least from my perspective, it was pretty clear it wasn't historic. And prior to the Planning Commission meeting, I wrote a letter to the Planning Commission saying that, you know, in my opinion, it wasn't. So for me, I'd rather, if we're going to make that determination, I'd rather have the council alter the initial Planning Commission decision rather than remanding it back, which is just going to delay everything for another few months. That's just my personal opinion.
And that's kind of what we came up with last week, Michael, at the meeting about the church, the temple.
I would just confirm that with someone from Corporation Counsel, that can physically be done in a resolution that the council passes. That would just be something you should double check. And Catherine, you are not being heard. I see that you're trying to talk.
Well, you know, Heather, I think whether it's a resolution that the council passes or the Planning Commission, the resolution needs to change.
Right. So you would remand it back to the petitioner, which is the Planning Commission is kind of like the middleman. The Planning Commission just confirmed what the Yeah, so go back to the preservation board. That would be the advice.
And Council President, that is what we will do. We will remand this back to the Preservation Board for whatever necessary adjustments we deem.
Counselor, is there any way we could just, before we make that decision, talk to the temple or the developer to see if that's makes the most sense? I just don't feel like I know exactly how this plays out from there.
Well, I received a call yesterday from someone that's working with a developer, and their concern was exactly what we're talking about. Were we going to make the whole building designated, or were we just going to designate the sanctuary? Because that's it. That's what they're looking, just the sanctuary. So that's their interest.
I know one of the other things that someone mentioned to me was they could do something privately where they put in the deed that they're forced to save the sanctuary, which then kind of takes the city out of it, but reaches the goal, which is saving the sanctuary. So I think that's another thing we should at least consider as well.
Well,
Audio, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
You can hear. Okay, I am sorry that I was having audio issues. I did just want to add to the question of
who's speaking?
Catherine Ryan from the
Okay.
law department. I'm sorry.
All right.
The designation does have to apply to the entire parcel because our zoning ordinance defines a protected site as a parcel. Although, as Heather was saying, the Landmark Preservation Board can recognize the primary contributing factor as the sanctuary, as the main historic structure. And if there's a special statement saying that the other features that are less historic or less historically significant, I should say, are non-contributing factors, that would ultimately make its way into the resolution, which I think would reach the outcome that it sounds like the owners are interested in protecting the sanctuary while allowing for future opportunities with the other elements of the property.
All right, so what we'll do, and this also in response to what Councilor Green said, we'll simply hold it for now. It may be necessary to have, to your point, Councilor Green, a committee meeting or a discussion of some sort, so we can just get some clarity going forward. So item number 10 will be held, Council President, and number 11 and 12, if there are no concerns or questions already.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Rudd.
Thank you, Madam President. I have items 13, 14, and 15. 13 is the budget, so it will be held while we evaluate the budget. 14 is there anybody who wants to, it passed committee, but anybody who wants to introduce it just to the rest of the council? The law department. This is the increase in printing costs for the appeals. Anyways, basically our costs for printing went up because there were more appeals than normal. Are there any questions from counselors on this? No? Okay, I'll call that ready. 15. Is there anybody from accountability, performance, and innovation who wants to describe this one?
Sam Edelstein. So this is a project management tool that we use in partnership with the iSchool at Syracuse University to manage some of our partnered projects. It has been really useful for us, and since they have been using it, it is helpful just to have the same tool across both organizations so that we're kind of on the same page about things. And so we're asking to continue to use that tool and invest in it for our office so that we can use it for those projects.
Any questions? This one also passed committee. So if there aren't any questions, I'll call it ready. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Green.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item 16, which is acceptance of manholes related to Salt City Market downtown. That passed through committee. I don't necessarily think there's a lot of controversy on it, but if anyone has any questions, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Paniagua.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Madam President. I am introducing item number 17, resolution memorializing the support of the Syracuse City Common Council for all healthcare workers and first responders who are in the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic, urging federal to increase funding to provide personal protection equipment for our healthcare workers. I am introducing this item. If no questions, all of my councilors are welcome to co-sponsor. And if there's no questions, this item I'll introduce as read.
Counselor, I'd be open to post-launching.
So will I.
So will I.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
It's all right.
Who's sponsor?
Clerk Curtis. The clerk Curtis, we're all sponsored.
Yeah, we're all sponsored. He lost audio. So
Rod.
keep moving. Counselor Carney.
Thank you, Madam President. I have item 18. All right, so I have item 18. Is there anyone from the police department? I've got a couple more questions. Anybody?
Sure. I'm here, Joe Cecil.
Okay, so we spoke with someone from Albany, where is the only place that they really do this, have their dog control fall under the police department. But it appears that it's something that they've done for the last, 13, 14 years. Theirs is set up a little bit different. So, my questions of what's the transition like and things like that really is sort of irrelevant when talking to them because they've never done it like we've done it. So my question then becomes, how are we going to go about, like with the transition, are dog control, are they going to have a different type of uniform? Are they going to stay in the same type of uniform that they currently are? What types of vehicles will they now be driving while falling under the police department? Those are, I think, still just the questions that arose after talking to Albany.
Sure. Do you want to take those?
Absolutely, Chief. Hi, this is Deputy Chief Trudell. So to answer your question, as far as the actual dog control officer's job goes, that will not change. All right, so they're going to come over and they're going to conduct the same work that they did under the parks that they do under the police department. There are certain things that will change relative to training and their uniform. Currently, as we have mentioned before, they're listed, they have badges that list them as peace officers, which they are not legally at all. So we're looking at changing their uniform to reflect dog control officer as opposed to a peace officer status. They are currently have batons and can't carry those based on not having a peace officer status.
Excuse me, Captain Trudell, for 1 second. I don't know where all the sound is coming back from, but again, can I ask everyone to kind of mute their phones, please? Thank you. I'm sorry, go on.
No, I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me now?
I can.
Right. Hopefully you caught most of that. Again, the job function is not going to change. Certain aspects of the way they've been doing their job relative to their equipment and relative to their training will change. And that has to change based on the fact that they're just not peace officers. They don't have that designation. They can issue citations under our local ordinance relative to some of the dog control measures, but we have to clean up their uniform relative to their badge and their baton. And we are going to issue them dog control spray. It's basically pepper spray specifically designed for dogs. There's specific training that goes into that. That's kind of like the officers and their equipment. As far as their vehicles, I know you mentioned that. Those will all come over to the police department. The budget relative to those vehicles and maintenance and gas all will transfer to the police department. Once this is approved, or if it's approved, we'll do a phased in transfer, right? So the supervision will immediately become the police department's responsibility. Day-to-day supervision. We see this as an opportunity to bring them over, get them on our radios, have a little bit more control over understanding exactly what calls they're on. I know there was some, discrepancy on, after hours 911 calls as opposed to during hours. When this transition is made, we'll be able to put them all right on 911 so that we can have their activity tracked. They'll physically stay at the Parks Department for now until we have enough space over here. And again, the phased in approach, we will be bringing them over to the police department.
Councilor Kearns, a question?
I do, Madam President.
No, I have one. This is Councilor Carney's meeting, and I asked him if I could ask a question.
Yeah, absolutely, Madam President.
So let me ask you, so maybe I missed this somewhere, Rich. So you're phasing them over to transfer to the police department. Do they stay in the parks budget or do they go into the police budget? Maybe I missed that somewhere.
So the officers themselves, their overtime, their salaries, the vehicles, and the maintenance of the vehicles, once this is approved, will all come over to the police department budget.
Is it in the budget now? Did we see that in this year's budget?
No, because this hasn't been approved.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yep. Go ahead, Counselor.
Just for a purpose of understanding, could you brief me a little bit as to what prompted the move again? What called for the transition? Can you hear me?
I can definitely hear your, but I think I'll have to turn that over to Julie and maybe Corey Driscoll if she's on.
Yeah, so we, looking at this holistically, we realize that dog control, the things that they do on a day-to-day basis, which is citations, talk to homeowners, go in, they assist the police on when there's warrants or just dangerous dogs. A lot of what they do on a day-to-day basis align more closely with what the police department does. And I think that, and we realized that as new officers came in, we weren't able to provide the training they need, the support they need, the resources they need. And quite frankly, on a lot of their calls, they already are working with the police department. So we started to look around and we found out that it kind of is uncommon for Parks and Rec to house dog control. So that's what prompted all of this.
Councilor Kearney, I have a question too. This is Pat Hogan.
Yep, go ahead, Councilor Hogan.
So Chief Trudell, they got you, and it's lit. Dog control is listed in the police department budget in the civilian line. So when is this going to happen? Either the commissioner or deputy chief can answer this. So the entire budget of the dog control operation will transfer from parks to the city police department.
Budgetary wise, I think July 1 it's in the budget that the personnel would move with them. But as far as the supervision wise, I think that would happen immediately.
Okay, and the housing and all that cost and all that would transfer to the police department too?
The only thing that would remain under Parks and Rec would be the contracts with the animal shelter and the animal hospital. That would remain with the Parks and Rec department in our budget.
For the foreseeable future?
Yes, for right now.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, I'm just going to call that ready.
Thank you, Counselor.
Yep.
Counselor Majoke.
Madam President, I have item 19 and 20. I'm going to call Chief Cecil to come forward to just run it down and then to see if anyone has questions.
Oh, thank you, Counselor. I don't have the two in front of me. Can you tell me what each one is, 19 and 20?
So the 19 is the Interfaith Work item.
Okay, sure. So this is the Interfaith Works, the dialogues that we do, the community dialogues that involve police officers and folks from the community getting together. Interfaith Works, so the price tag is about $30,000. These dialogues are designed to give each side, both police and community, a different perspective that they might not have otherwise. They talk about an array of things in these dialogues. And keep in mind, on the community side of it, the dialogues include both adults and young people talking back and forth with police officers who we rotate through there frequently, so it's not the same officers. That's pretty much it in a summary.
Okay, thank you. What has question?
No question, Councilman Joe, but just a comment. Did I interrupt somebody?
No, I was just gonna say, I think we beat that up pretty good, but go ahead, Councilman.
We did. I was going to reiterate what we discussed, Council President, if that's okay, and Deputy Chief. So obviously, when you talk about providing the service, just to clarify what our issue was, you have to be able to demonstrate what that service is. What is the deliverable? What will we get? If the goal if the goal of a community police dialogue is to improve relations, then how do you demonstrate improvement in relations? And no information we've received have demonstrated that. And it's necessary that, as we talked about in the standing committee meeting, that as far as we're concerned, the appropriate people take part in the dialogue. And so the deputy mayor, and I think it was almost simultaneous, but she mentioned it first along with Council President, recommended that those who participate in the SNUG program at Southwest Community Center and the other anti-violence program need to be the people in the room having those discussions. They're closer to the street. And with due respect, the people who I saw in that image, no disrespect to them, probably know almost nothing about what happens outside in the street. And so if you're going to talk about improving relations, then you need to have the people in the room who have the problem. And I think you have a greater chance of finding some common ground, you know, if you got police officers and you got persons in the room who are at least working with that population with the problem directly. And so that is our recommendation, is what we prefer. And that, as far as we're concerned, the only way we're moving this thing forward is if that's agreed to. But we would rather that we get some kind of principal deliverable from this project. $30,000, especially now, we can't just spend willy-nilly without some kind of return on investment. No disrespect, but we don't need to hear about structure and how many meetings you had. We need to know what kind of improvements have happened, you know. And so that is what we're doing, Councilman Joke. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I believe a good number of us are okay with it moving forward, as long as we know we're getting something tangible back. As far as we're concerned, that is the type of tangible relationship and information that we need to see that this thing has happened, some successes. Thank you, Madam President and Councilman Joe.
Just to repeat, I agree with all that, but I still don't quite understand how much it costs from the police end. I know there was the $6,000 number, but I still have.
Yeah.
Am I missing that part, or is it coming?
Yeah, Council, I don't know what other number you're looking for. The $3,000 is to administer it and probably pay other bills from Interfaith Works when they bring the community folks there. The cost of the $5,000 to $6,000 is the officer's cost. Again, most of it, I would say upwards of 85% of it is probably overtime. They're going there on an overtime basis because we can't just pull them off patrol to do it. And some of it is on straight time. I don't know what, I know you wanted me to divide the number of officers into that number, but your math is, as I said before, way over my head. The cost of police from the police standpoint to send police officers to this dialogue is between $5,000 and $6,000 per year.
But that sounds so low that it would be very few. It just sounds too low. That's why I asked for the backup of what goes into the 6,000, because there should be a calculation of the number of circles, the number of officers involved, the hours per circle that gets to a total number of hours, and then some type of average hourly rate that the city actually pays officers, whether it be straight time or not, or overtime. And it seems like it'd be a function somewhere in between. Like some of it's probably straight time, some of it's probably overtime. And that number should reflect it, and then that should equal the number that you're saying. So if that equals 6,000, then okay. But it just seems like 6,000 sounds low to me.
Okay. Yep, I think that's the first time you ever said anything sounded low when it comes to money for the police department. But keep in mind, I sent a thing out to Councilor Majoke early on when this thing hit the agenda it came from Interfaith Works. It lists the number of dialogues. Again, it was just quantitative, but it lists the number of dialogues and the number of participants. So if you took those numbers
Okay.
from that data
So
sheet.
I'll take them and I'll take them and I'll back out an hourly wage. And if it's $12 an hour, I'm going to ask for a different number.
Okay, understood.
I still think I asked it before, but it's okay. I'll
did.
get the numbers.
So, Councilman Zuck, I'm not sure. We may need to determine if there's a consensus.
Can you hear me, Counselor? I don't know what happened. My phone just decided not to share any information. I don't know. It came back.
It's short. There's still some questions relative to this, and maybe those questions can be answered by Monday. If so, then I would think. Again, I don't want to speak for everybody. I think you would have a decent amount of support, but I would suspect that if the information is not provided, we may be holding this again. Obviously, you will make the determination of whether you hold it again, but Councilor Wright had some questions that he feels not been answered yet.
You said Councilor Rudd had a question about item 19, right?
Yeah, he already asked it, but I guess they're going to do some kind of follow-up discussion.
Okay. All right. I'm going to keep it on. If those questions are not answered by Monday, we may have to take further action. But I'm going to keep
Counselor,
it on.
I'll give you a call to tell you what I asked after
Okay.
Your phone wasn't working.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are we good to move on to item 20?
Councilor Mayo, just as a way of a comment, when you're dealing with grants from Interfaith or any other community agency, if there are going to be suggested changes to make the program fit better to the need of the city, there's going to be some discussion with the agency so that they can do their due diligence with their grantor to make those references into their changes into their grant, just to let you know.
Councilor Paniagua, no disrespect on this end, right? But we've been talking to Interfaith Work about this same issue for the last 4 to 5 years. So it's not any change. It's just has never been done. So it's nothing we're asking them to change. We just need the information that we are looking for to continue to fund their program. That's it.
I always caution us to not act as agents on behalf of outside agencies. That's not even legal. The bottom line is we want a return on our investment. So we need to know if the goal, as I stated, is to improve relations. How do you demonstrate that relations have been improved? I've not seen that yet, and I don't believe anybody else has either.
And most importantly, it's $30,000 of taxpayer money, our money that we're giving to them. It's not a grant that they're applying for from federal or state or the Allen Foundation. It is city taxpayer dollars that we are giving this agency. So what they need to do is actually come to the table when we ask them to come to a committee meeting. And if they want to have a discussion about it. But this is a conversation that's been going on for the past 6 years that I've been on the council. So, probably longer.
Yeah, it's just new to me. I'm sorry that, it creates a little discomfort. However, they were not invited to the last committee meeting and they were ready to present all the information you wanted. So maybe
Just
for
going
the
to
next.
say this, Counselor, we can move on to 20, but they've presented for the last 6-7 years and they're presenting the same thing. We're looking for the deliverables, not just their little standard presentation. They know what we're looking for.
I just wanted to, make a comment.
All right. Well, thank you. Moving on to item 20. Chief Cecil, item 20 is the payment to various vendors.
Sure. Thanks, Counselor. Yep, this is approximately $30,000 to pay the vendors who did body work for our police vehicles when they're involved in crashes. Keep in mind, this was our old practice. Our new policy, our new practice is to go through PeopleSoft. So you shouldn't see any more of these, but these vendors were working on our cars back when the process was being changed. So the work has been completed and we're just asking for approval to pay them now.
Anyone with questions, councilors? So and you know this already, Chief, that the standard practice, and we talked about this in the committee meeting, that before we pay anybody, we know this stuff beforehand. That was the recommendation from the counselors, and I think they stand by that.
Sure.
Go ahead, Chief.
I was just going to say absolutely, and you deserve that as well. But just keep in mind we were following the process at the time as this policy was changing, and the policy at the time was not PeopleSoft, and it was not necessarily to get approval. It was to take these cars around, or I'm sorry, to send these bids out and find the best available person who would fix these cars at the cheapest amount. So we were working under the previous policy, and as it was changing, these guys were doing the work for us as vendors. But I understand fully. You shouldn't see any more of these coming across your desk like this.
All right. Thank you so much. If there's no more question.
Can I ask one based back on the interfaith one on the cost? So, like, one question: if officers got paid overtime, I don't know how long. If the dialogues are 2 hours, if officers went on overtime, would they each get paid 4 hours?
Most likely, per our contract, if you get called in on something. Counselor, I can get those numbers for you, and I'll get them to you before Monday. It's just a matter of pulling all the data from our the overtime data. We can pull it, and I can get the exact number of officers that participated. The answer to that specific question is, yeah, when you get called in or per our contract, it's 4 hours.
Right. So that I'm asking, because like even not doing that, if I did the 6,000 number, the higher end of your estimate, and I said, I don't know how many officers go to a circle.
I think it's 2 or 3.
Right. So if there are 3 per circle, then it's and if there were 10 circles, and if each circle met 10 times, then the hourly is $20. Which seems too low, especially given that a lot of it's overtime, and especially given that for each of those hours, you might be getting paid 4 hours, accounting for 2 hours. So I just think the cost is probably more like 20. It's something higher. It's something higher for sure. That's why I asked for the backup.
Okay, I get you the number of officers. Again, that data came right out of our budget audit. They basically tracked everybody that went to one of these things on overtime. They fill out a slip and they put it what's called a PC number, which tracks it. So I don't know if the number is going to go, the overall cost is going to go up, but I get you the number of officers that went to the dialogues. Not a problem.
I have one question, Cecil. Do we have the capacity to send officers maybe like 1 hour out of their shift so they're not going on overtime? Because these are scheduled meetings, so it's not like it's something that just comes up that day. Like we know exactly when the meetings are taking place. So is there a way to schedule in the time for the officers to go so we won't run into the overtime?
Sure, there's always ways to try and do that. The issue, of course, is I don't know how long these dialogues are, if they're 2 or 3 hours long. We can certainly try and do that, but it all depends on, even though they're set and they're scheduled, the meetings themselves, you never know what's going to happen that day. So if we were going to try to take somebody out of the 3 to 11 shift, a couple officers, depending on what's going on that day, we have a couple of shootings, we have a homicide, we have something that's tying them all up, then you would have nobody at the dialogue. So, but it's certainly something we can look at doing because it would save money, no doubt.
Yeah, because I don't, I'm not comfortable with spending the overtime pay on the dialogues.
Understood.
Said I'm not depending on the cost again, if it's deemed by the police department that it would be in the best interest of an officer and the public that they attend the sessions, that might be the only other exception I would say to that.
All right. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Is any more questions? Madam President, I consider all my item 19 and 20 ready, and that's it for me.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Allen.
You have items 21 through 24. And all of these are actually in Councilor Hogan's district. So I did want to yield some time to him to see if he had any questions or concerns, but they were already on my end.
Okay. Counselor Allen, they're already on my end too.
Okay, so we're all set.
All righty, and with that, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and we'll be on again at 1 o'clock on this thread, right, Jim? On this line for parks. Okay, I guess I'll see everybody.
That is a, sorry.
What'd you say, Jim?
That's a different link than the study session.
Okay.
So I'll see everybody on another link at 1 o'clock. Thank you.